Hello, my name is Elaine Ewan, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm recording from my home in Philadelphia in the US. And today and next session, we're going to talk about working with today's lay audiences. I feel this is an important topic because monastics are often seen and increasingly relied upon as a refuge, and comfort, safety in this changing world. So it's important for us as laypersons and monastics to acknowledge some of the similarities and differences we may all have around our personal and social attributes. So that's what this series is about, and I hope you find it useful. So, the first question we might have today is, who are these lay audiences and what do they need at this time? I'm going to pause at certain points in this presentations with posing you some questions, and you might want to consider writing just a few of your thoughts down. There's no right and wrong answer to these questions. Um, they're just food for thought and food for you to think about your own social locations. So, yeah, let's get started. First, we might consider the nature of what are these what I'm calling contemporary learning communities. They may be, of course, your Gompa, your practice situations, but I'm thinking more about when people come to us and they want some solace, comfort. They want to learn something in a slightly different way. So the community itself may be our own Sangha, people in our communities, in our monastic communities. Um, it might be people coming to a class. It might be a gathering of lay people that you have. And they may come for different activities such as meditation, prayer, discussion. Um, sort of what kinds of things are they seeking? And that leads naturally to the place that we may be meeting in. I consider any place a social field, kind of like a basketball or social field, um, where ideas and conversation is exchanged. So these social fields may vary from being a meditation hall, your gompa, a classroom, even a cafe where you're having coffee. So, I guess the question is, how is conversation shaped in these various locations? And lastly, we are conversing with lay populations who might be seeking a certain outcome. And certainly they want to understand the Dharma more from you. But with what flavor, tone? This is where social sensibility, with its attributes of empathy and compassion, are important. So let's just take a half a minute to just consider what communities you may be interested in interacting with, or maybe you've already interacted with, where these conversations may be taking place, and what outcomes um, might be expected in these communities. So let's just take a little bit of time to think about this. And I'll give you some time to write a few ideas down. So the question is, what did you encounter in your thoughts? what differences do you see here? I've put up a few photos as just sort of polar opposites, but um, the Sangha is often seen as a field of merit. So, how do you how do you see merit in these two situations? How does merit come to you? Certainly in your monastic garb, monastic communities where you're practicing puja. But on the bottom, you can see Western faces, different ages, and gathering in a cafe. How is the Sangha different in these two groups? And how might communicating with them differ? As we go through this presentation, consider how differences as a monastic and lay person show up. It's important to acknowledge these differences and not bury them, but also important not to get fixated on them either. I just want us to have a sense of curiosity. So, first, a poll. How might we understand each other? How do we understand ourselves? So, I've put a few um, ideas here. How do we identify ourselves and others? This is certainly open ended, and keep options from your slides available. So, just I'm going to give you some time again to just jot down a few ideas of how do you understand yourself? How do you understand yourself even in your monastery? What differences might there be in economic class or in work settings, even in your monastery? Um, Ethnic groups between Bhutanese and Indians. Um, do you have different relationships with family and friends? Is your sense of self and space different? Time? Do you process time differently? All these things. So let's just take I'll give you a little bit of time just to think about all these things and maybe jot down a few things that you feel for yourself. I once did this exercise before, and I know monastics often don't think a lot about yourself. So this is kind of a luxurious time. Just give it some thought, you know. Go back to how you were raised in your village, things like that. Who are you? Okay, and so the thing about individual attributes is they go into something um, that we call in the West cultural identity. So, cultural identity includes all the things that you've been sort of jotting down that we've been talking about. And they all sort of form this circle that we call cultural identity. And it's really combined patterns of human behavior. So it includes language, thoughts, communications, actions, customs, beliefs, values of individuals. So that I ask you to think about your individual qualities, but also of groups. So it's how people think and how they behave, and of course, the formation of any one group. So, can you think of different cultural identities that either you have, um, that you have within your monastery, among the people, the lay people you know? Can you think of different cultural identities um, of what might you experience through the internet and social media? What do you see as different cultural identities? So let's just take a few bits of time to think about that. Like, what have you experienced in terms of cultural identities, either be within your monastery, your nunnery, your closed social groups, or with others, with other lay persons, with on the internet? What have you experienced? Okay, so it's important to realize, in addition to what we just mentioned about cultural identity, is that these qualities are constantly changing. So, identity is not a single thing, it is constantly recreated in different social and historical contexts. So, you realize every moment to moment from everyday interactions in the world that your social identity may be changing. So, for instance, how does your identity change when you're not in the monastery? Does it change when you're with your family, or when you go to the cafe, or when you're doing puja, or when you're um, down for the night reading, relaxing, surfing the internet? How does your social identity change? So let's just take a few moments to think about that. Moment to moment, from everyday interactions with the social world. That's how it changes. Our interactions help it change. So, as you consider these differences, please keep in mind that roles and expectations vary. So, first individually and also with others. For instance, between monastic and lay, but even within different groups of monastics, your superiors, the new monks or nuns, what are the roles there? And what expectations are attached to these roles? So just think about all these different, it's the different qualities of the interactions that you have day to day. So how do we relate with each other? So in thinking about your day to day interactions, what variations do you see? I mean, I'm calling it by social status, but it might be with status within your monastery, or within your village, or within your family, the social status. Or maybe by age, the age within your monastery, or within your village, or within your family. And that's not else. So I'm just saying, what else might you see in terms of variation, in terms of the roles and expectations? Roles and expectations that we take on very naturally within our families, or maybe even within our monasteries. And with each of those roles come expectations and how we may fulfill those roles. So let's just take a moment to think about that and how you've experienced it in your life. So, in conclusion, it's really important to have some sensitivity around how we perceive culture, because frankly, there's too many cultures and traditions to know everything. And individuals may not neatly fit into any one box that we have expectations about them. Um, so it's sensitivity is very important. It includes listening and attentiveness, listening certainly to what we hear and what we know, but certainly attentive to even things like body language, and their attention to you. And that kind of sensitivity gives dignity and respect to others, and sort of creates a real conduit through which we can have be authentically present and caring for others. And so it's important to be relaxed and natural. Certainly, we have all of our roles, and I know monastics are often um, very revered, but it's also important to be natural and authentic so that genuine communication can happen. So, we'll continue next month with some exercises that will allow you to reflect on your own cultural aspects and how you might interact with lay populations. So, I hope to see you there.